Welcome in to Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and we are here to talk all things college basketball. As always, we're going to take you through everything you need to know, kind of from the past week, things to look forward to in the next week, and plenty more along the way. On this week's episode, we will start off the show talking about John Calipari's return to Kentucky. We get to see him face off as the head coach of Arkansas against Kentucky in Rupp Arena. That is going to be the big showdown event of the weekend across college basketball. I don't care what anyone has to say. We'll talk about that here in the first segment, everything surrounding it as well. Then in the second segment, we are going to talk about Tom Izzo and Michigan State, the kind of proverbial middle finger they're putting up to the rest of basketball. They are one of the best teams in the country right now on an extended win streak. They look really, really good. They are just mowing through the Big Ten as we speak, but they're doing it in an unconventional way, in a very Tom Izzo type of way. We'll talk about what that means and how they're able to do it in the second segment. So when we finish talking about those two bigger topics, we will finish the show in the third segment, as always, with the games of the week. Get you ready for what you need to watch across college basketball as we flip the calendar into February. So we are rolling right along here through the college basketball season. We are we are right there, right on the edge of having some big bubble conversations to talk about, having some more hot seat conversations to talk about. So much right there on the horizon, and we are working our way quickly towards it in the coming month. But let's go ahead and get things started here. Let's talk about John Calipari returning to Kentucky, because this is one of the big storylines that we've been waiting for since the preseason. John Calipari, synonymous with Kentucky, he spent over a decade there as their head coach, had a lot of success as their head coach, at least in the first decade that he was coaching there. But then the relationship starts to go sour. As we know, post COVID, he only has one NCAA tournament win, one SEC tournament win. The rumblings had started to grow. The fan base was unhappy. There was just a disconnect between him, the style of basketball he wanted to play, the type of roster he wanted to build, and what the fan base, which is a very educated and very engaged fan base, wanted him to do. Now, you cannot have a fan base just telling you what to do. That's never going to work if you're a head coach. You're the head coach for a reason. You have a high level of understanding of what you need to get done in that position. But it went beyond the fan base. And I think that's where Calipari struggled at Kentucky to adapt, because it's one thing for the fan base to want something different. It's another for them to be able to directly point at other programs, at other coaches, at other styles of play and roster building strategies that have proven track records of success. John Calipari has always been associated with the one and done, even all the way back at UMass, who you would not think would be able to make that their identity. He did it again at Memphis, although his rosters there and at UMass, to be fair, were not completely structured through the one and done type of model. But then again, you weren't completely able to build in his early days at Memphis and throughout his time at UMass, because the top freshmen in the country often went directly to the NBA draft. So it's interesting to watch, because the evolution of how college basketball's rosters have been built has lasted through his tenure as a head coach. There have been adjustments made, but he had his greatest success, there's no doubt about it, as a coach who invested in the one and done culture, who brought in the top freshmen every year, developed them, sent them off to the NBA, and then brought in a new crop of guys. That has not been the winning formula in quite a while now. And so Kentucky fans who more so than yes, it was important to them to have the Kentucky representation in the NBA. The number of players who were in the NBA who had that Kentucky brand attached to them forever. That's something that you do want and that is important. But it's not the only thing that matters. You still want to succeed in college basketball. You want to be, as a fan of that team, able to celebrate your team, not just players who used to play for your team. And so, as it continued, as John Calipari refused to change and the results went away, things got tense. Now, in the offseason, an opportunity comes up where he's able to get a fresh start at Arkansas, head out the door. And obviously, moving within the SEC, it was inevitable that he was going to face a return game against his former school. And so the questions have been kind of circulating for about as long as they can. Since day one, we've been thinking, what reception will he get from the Kentucky fan base? I think early on, definitely the expectation was that it would be adversarial, at least in year one, because of the way that things went down. They did not feel heard as a fan base. They already were frustrated. And then he takes off. But then Mark Pope comes in and he revitalizes things. He speaks directly to Big Blue Nation. He is doing a lot of the things that they wished they had been able to do, utilizing the transfer portal, playing an up-tempo, kind of modern style of basketball, focusing on culture and focusing on the importance of the Kentucky fan base, of the history of the program, of the title Big Blue Nation to the culture at Kentucky. I mean, he is everything that a Kentucky fan could ask for in a coach: a former player, a former captain, and a guy who at all times wants the fans to know that they are important to what he is doing. And where John Calipari had become a little bit sheltered towards the end, this is the polar opposite. So I now think that Kentucky fans are in a spot where they don't have to boo John Calipari. I have no doubt that a segment of them will, but I do not think it will be a universal Rupp Arena wide booing of John Calipari. And if it is, I don't think it will be in a nasty kind of um tone. And I know that sounds a little bit strange, like the tone of booing, but if you think about it, plenty of fan bases, when they introduce the starting lineups, right? They go through the starting team for the opposition. And as they list the players, sometimes you hear boos, sometimes you hear a "you suck" chant, um, just kind of a silence to try to get in their heads, whatever it is. Lots of schools have different traditions that they do. But it never feels like it's a personal attack on the player when they boo. Same with the opposing coach. There's often a boo. Now, you get an opposing player who has a history against that school, who has taunted that school, who has received a technical foul in the previous game, something along those lines, went after somebody on Twitter, whatever it is. Listen to the boo then. It's different. There is a completely different tone behind it when that happens. And so I think if we get a widespread, just arena-wide boo of John Calipari, I think it will largely be the sort of acknowledgement boo rather than the hatred boo that you would have gotten. Because sure, you want to let your former head coach know that he's now on the opposite sideline. There's nothing wrong with that. We'll see how the actual boos come down. when we get there. But I think the people in the most awkward position now are the Arkansas fans. What happens if John Calipari goes in here and gets, I mean, if he gets blown out for sure, but if they lose to his former school, now what are you hanging your hat on right now? Like, you're off the bubble. You're not really in the mix. You've shown no signs that you can win consistently in the SEC. So there's no real hope that you're going to make the NCAA tournament if you lose this game. You've got a month left to go. You're without your best player. And now your coach's opportunity to kind of like prove something is out the window too. So there's there's a lot riding on this game if you're Arkansas. Because if you pick up the win, I think you can start to sell yourself on, okay, we're starting to turn things around. Sure, we're playing without Boogie Fland, but like there's enough there that we could get this flipped around and start making a push back towards that bowl. Just need to pick up all the wins outside the top 25 and a couple of upsets along the way. I think you can sell yourself on that. But you drop this one, and I think morale hits an all-time low for a John Calipari program because really, I mean, what are you looking forward to beyond looking to next season? Like it becomes a grim picture for Arkansas the rest of this year if they drop this one over the weekend. When we come back on the other side, we will talk about Tom Izzo and what he's doing at Michigan State. It's very interesting. So we'll get into it right here on Three True Values. Welcome back into Three True Values as we keep rolling through the show. Today, we've got to talk about Tom Izzo and Michigan State, the middle finger that they're giving to the rest of basketball as a whole. As they roll through and continue to pick up wins, they really are dominating in the Big Ten at this moment. I think they have got a real shot to just tear through college basketball on the way to March and make a big impact as Tom Izzo gets his kind of revenge year. I have been talking about, not that Tom Izzo, cares what I'm saying on these airwaves, but I've been saying for a while now that Tom Izzo looks like he's kind of closing in on the end of his career, the way that he just relies on conversations about NIL and how it's ruined things, and the transfer portal, how it's ruined things, and the style of play and how he dislikes it. And just like when you don't like most of the key parts of what you do, you're probably close to retirement or at least a job change. And we know Tom Izzo is not changing jobs. So that's the way I've felt for a little while now. Who knows if this actually like tangibly changes that part of it, because he might still just hate, and he has still expressed at certain times how he doesn't like different aspects of what he's forced to do now. But you can also, as we've seen in college basketball with different coaches, find some different ways around it. Like, sure, you're not getting the experience of what things were in the year 2004, but you can hire a general manager. You can hire assistant coaches who are young and who have the kind of drive to do the various things that you aren't used to or don't really have interest in. There's a lot of different things you can do to get you back into the part of coaching that you love. But as we continue talking about this year's team at Michigan State, the group that he's got, a lot of returning players, a couple of freshmen, Jace Richardson, the biggest among them, a couple of transfers, actually. Zapala and Fiddler, the notable ones who kind of are adding something to this team. And I think it's interesting to look because he's got the former five stars. He's got Xavier Booker, who's starting to. I just, every time I watch Xavier Booker, it's like, is he going to turn that corner? Is he going to show some improvement? And I think he's a better basketball player today. It just doesn't always show up in the box scores just yet. I think he might just get there. I'm not gonna sell all my stock in Xavier Booker just yet. But Jace Richardson, a guy who is going to be a first round NBA draft prospect, not because he's physically imposing, not because he has some just incredible skill set in one area, but because he makes the right plays. Like, just watch him play. He is always in the right spot. He makes the right cut. He makes the right pass, takes the right shot. He does everything that you want a player to do when you want them to do it. So he is going to land somewhere and be a role player in the NBA quite soon. But then you look through the rest of the roster, and most of it was there last year, and you wonder what is so different. I think one, you did fill some of the holes. Like there's no doubt that Frankie Fiddler fills a hole. Zapala helps fill a hole at the center position. I think that they kind of trimmed off some of the um, pieces of the roster that just weren't fully fitting into the style that Tom Izzo wanted to play. And I think that Tom Izzo has embraced what he wants to do. This is a team that is shooting 28.9% from three. Now, conventional wisdom in modern basketball would tell you that this would be a terrible basketball team, that they would have no chance of success. And yet here they are. They have found ways in the mid range. They have found ways to get to the free throw line, found ways to get creative actions to find players at the rim, to use offensive rebounding, to get close opportunities to the basket. This is a team that hustles. This is a team that is bought in to running up and down the court and getting after it every possession. And that is what Tom Izzo needs to have great success. I think that's part of what he truly at his core hates about the NIL and the transfer portal era is this thought that a lot of coaches have. And it's definitely something that's out there. It's something that you have to fight against, though, not just accept that it's there. And I think Tom Izzo is fighting against it now. And it's working in his favor. Fighting against the idea that the transfer portal and NIL create complacency with these kids, a lack of commitment. At the end of the day, these kids still want to go be NBA players. They want to play professional basketball. They want to have success. They want NCAA tournament runs. They have to hear from someone they respect, though, what it takes to get there. And Tom Izzo, better than just about anyone, can provide that information. So I think this is something that is sustainable for Tom Izzo. Yes, they're shooting 28.9% from three. You would love for that number, at least the percentage, because look, they're also near the bottom of the country in attempts. You can be near the bottom in attempts as long as you're doing all those other things. If you're grabbing offensive rebounds, like I said, if you are efficient from the mid range, if you are able to get to the rim. Ultimately, dunks and layups are the most efficient shots in basketball. That and free throws. Like 3-point shots, yes, are efficient. But there is nothing more efficient than being able to just drop the ball into the hole. Those are close to 100% makes. And then free throws, uncontested. So you're going to hit a large number of those. Then 3-point shots, yes, because of the extra point, become more valuable than the mid-range. But it's not this like just it's really it's kind of the origin of the name of this podcast. 3 true values. Okay? You get 1 point for a free throw. You get 2 points for a shot inside the 3-point line. And you get 3 points outside of that line. So the value is to shoot from the closest you can for that point value. Obviously, the free throw, you don't have a choice. To get 2 points, the most efficient way to do that is a layup or a dunk. To score 3 points, the most efficient way to do that is to shoot it from the corner. There's not this. The same way that you don't want to take mid-range shots, you shouldn't want to take 40-foot threes. It's the same concept here. And I think a lot of people, especially as they talk about the issues with basketball today, they talk about this cookie cutter style and whatever. Like basketball has been figured out in a lot of ways. Why would I take a 40-foot three when I can take one from 25, from 24? What extra value is there to take the shot from there? That I have open space to get it off? Okay, well, how about we force the defense to stop us from taking an easy two so that we can take the 24 footer without a defender in your face? Like, yes, some basketball starts to look cookie cutter, but that's because it's the best way to do it. Now, the whole idea of passing up on layups for threes, that's ridiculous. I will never get behind that extent of the 3 for 2 argument. But the point here is you don't have to shoot threes if you can get layups. He has a group that can get layups. And so they are going to find success here at Michigan State. They have done it efficiently. They compete on defense as well. Tom Izzo has figured out his way to get through this era. Now, it's still a year over year thing. Like he's going to have to build a new roster next year. Like I said, I think Jace Richardson probably goes to the NBA draft. He's got some seniors in this group, but he will have some returning talent. And I think that's the base. And he will be able to build more rosters here to come. Big fan of what Tom Izzo has done over multiple decades at Michigan State. Had a rough spot where I didn't really agree with the way he was approaching things, but now I think I can start to get back behind the methods that he is using there for the Spartans. When we come back on the other side, we will get you out of here with the games of the week. As always, thank you for listening to Three True Values. Welcome back in as we get you out of here today with the games of the week. As always, we run through the game each day of the week over the next 7 days that you're going to want to watch so that you can keep your finger on the pulse of college basketball. We have on Thursday night here tonight, if you're listening to the show as it releases, or at least within the first few hours, I recommend you tune in for Oregon and UCLA tonight. Oregon, the ranked team in this matchup, but suffering a couple of losses recently. They don't look as just they look dominant early in the season. Let's be honest, and they have not looked quite as good recently. UCLA, on the other hand, had that skid, the Mick Cronin stuff. We talked about it kind of ad nauseum here, but they're back on the right track. They are on a win streak. Mick Cronin looks much happier with what he's getting from his team. And so we will see if they can pull one out that would be big for their resume tonight. Then on Friday, we got Purdue and Indiana. Mike Woodson certainly on the hot seat. The kind of response to him being placed in first pressure wash and then a hot seat piece for on three. Yeah, they want him out of there. Fans are not happy with Mike Woodson. Arkansas and Kentucky. That's where we're going on Saturday. I don't care what Seth Greenberg has to say, and I didn't mention this in the first segment. Probably should have, but here we are, and we've got time left in the show. So I'm going to address this. Seth Greenberg coming out and saying that College Game Day did not go to Arkansas, Kentucky for John Calipari's return because no one outside of Arkansas or Kentucky cares. Yeah, I don't know what Seth's talking about there. I think this is the storyline of the day. I don't think there is another storyline. Now, there will be better basketball games. Without question, there will be better basketball games. Kentucky should wipe the floor with Arkansas right now, based off of what they both are putting out on the floor, their recent results. I think Arkansas is going to give a better effort than they probably otherwise would in a normal situation, like if we were predicting how this would go, because of the John Calipari return. Everyone wants to know how that crowd will react to John Calipari. Everyone wants to know how John Calipari will react to that crowd. We don't know until it happens. We don't know how he's going to react in terms of on the court. Like, if things start to get a little chippy, like, is he going to get a technical? Well, then what? What if he got ejected? Like, this has the potential to be the biggest story of the regular season. Just this game. So while there's no wrong, like, you can choose Duke UNC as the game of the day, and you will always be right. There's no wrong answer here. Like, yes, Duke UNC, the most rich basketball rivalry there is. It should always be on here. And in fact, I'll give it a co slot. Like, it'll be the co game of the day. UNC and Duke. Even though UNC in some real trouble right now. Like, Hubert Davis he's got to get that thing fixed because they are probably on the wrong side of the bubble right now, if you ask me. If not just holding on to that last four in. And they don't have that many more resume building opportunities in the ACC. But back to Arkansas and Kentucky. Like, what about this game can you just try to dismiss? I don't understand it. Like, look, I'm not going to get into the whole, like, I know there's other people who have accused Seth Greenberg of kind of defending John Calipari's honor at different times and whatever, but I don't really see how this even accomplishes that. I think this is just an opinion that he has that is confusing to me. But we move on to Sunday, where our game of the day is Illinois and Ohio State. Illinois up in the top 25. They've got some really solid players. I think that they are a team that has potential, upward potential, to become a real contender in the NCAA tournament if they can kind of get a couple things just ironed out. I think they just have to iron them out. They've got all the pieces. They've got to fall perfectly into place, though, if they're going to be a real kind of Final Four contender as we get to March. Ohio State, they're a bubble team and have a couple things to kind of figure out along the way. It's year one for Jake Diebler there. And then on Monday, we get a blockbuster matchup, Kansas and Iowa State. That one's just, I mean, pretty self-explanatory. Two top 10 teams fighting for kind of superiority in the Big 12, the right to kind of be that top team that people are coming after, along with Houston, of course. I think this one's just must watch TV. On Tuesday, we've got Baylor and Texas Tech. Baylor has kind of surged here recently. Texas Tech is surging. They are a darling in the computer numbers. We know that. And VJ Edgecombe is on fire recently, a potential top 5 NBA draft pick, a guy who has a lot of cachet. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch how he plays over this final month of the season. If he can play how he's been playing the last few games, watch out, because they could be a real problem if they can get him going. And then on Wednesday, we wrap up here with UCF and Cincinnati. Unranked matchup, but two bubble teams who are in desperate need of some big wins, some resume building wins, and a win over another team on the bubble always accomplishes that. So UCF and Cincinnati both trying to get on track there to make a March Madness push. Thanks for tuning in to Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and we will be back on Tuesday with a mailbag episode, and then again on Thursday with our regularly scheduled programming. Thanks for tuning in.